The encounter. The airport lounge hummed with its usual chaos. Flight announcements crackling over the speakers, rolling suitcases clattering along polished floors, and passengers bustling between gates. Amelia Taylor, a poised woman in her mid-40s, adjusted her silk scarf and smoothed her tailored blazer as she approached Gate 17, a seasoned executive for an international luxury brand. Amelia was used to first-class comforts, tight schedules, and efficiency. Delays irritated her, and today was no exception. Her flight to New York was running 45 minutes late, and she had an important meeting scheduled the moment she landed. She glanced at her ticket for the 100th time. The number 2 gleaming back at her. First class meant no interruptions, no unsolicited small talk, and certainly no unnecessary delays. It was her sanctuary in the chaos of travel. When boarding began, Amelia strode confidently onto the plane, her expensive leather carry-on hanging effortlessly on her shoulder. Settling into her window seat, she sighed with relief, her mind already strategizing for the meeting ahead. Her calm was short-lived. A man in a military uniform appeared at the aisle beside her. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and wore his fatigues with the precision of someone accustomed to discipline. He had a duffel bag slung over one shoulder, its edges frayed and worn from use. Amelia noticed his slight limp as he paused, checking the row numbers. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said politely, his voice deep but soft. "I believe 2B is my seat." Amelia's practiced smile faltered. Her gaze swept over him, noting the neat stitching of his name tag. Staff Sergeant Michael Carter. Her irritation surfaced as she forced a tight smile. "Of course," she said curtly, shifting slightly as he slid into the seat beside her. The soldier settled in, taking care to place his bag in the overhead compartment. As he moved, Amelia caught a glimpse of a scar running down the side of his neck, disappearing beneath his collar. His hands were calloused, and his movements were deliberate, almost cautious. As they waited for the other passengers to board, Amelia's irritation simmered. She had seen it before. Soldiers expecting gratitude, special treatment, and the constant "thank you for your service" remarks. The notion felt performative to her, a way for people to pat themselves on the back for saying the right thing. Her disdain grew when a flight attendant approached their row, her face lighting up at the sight of the uniform. "Thank you for your service," the attendant said warmly, handing the soldier a complimentary drink. "Water is fine," Michael said, his tone polite but reserved. Amelia couldn't hold back her scoff. "Special treatment everywhere you go, Ice." Michael glanced at her, his expression neutral but his jaw tightening slightly. "I don't ask for it, ma'am." "Oh, please," she said, leaning back in her seat. "You all expect it, don't you? The discounts, the free upgrades, the constant applause for just doing your job." Michael said nothing, turning his attention to the small photograph he had pulled from his pocket. Amelia caught a glimpse of the image, a little girl with bright eyes and a wide smile, her hair tied in 2 pigtails. "What's that?" Amelia asked, her tone laced with sarcasm. "Your propaganda photo to pull at everyone's heartstrings." Michael's fingers tightened around the photograph, but his voice remained calm. "That's my daughter, Lily. She's 5. Amelia rolled her eyes. "Let me guess, leaving her behind to save the world. A noble mission, I'm sure." Michael hesitated, his gaze fixed on the photo. "Actually, I'm on my way to New York for her surgery. She's fighting stage 4 neuroblastoma." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Amelia's sharp retort faltered for a moment before she quickly recovered. "And I suppose you're expecting someone to overhear and start a charity for you." Michael turned to face her, his eyes weary but steady. "No, ma'am. I just want to be there for my daughter." The plane began its taxi toward the runway, and an uncomfortable silence filled the space between them. Amelia turned her attention to her tablet, scrolling through emails to avoid the tension. She felt the weight of Michael's presence beside her, his quiet composure unsettling her more than she wanted to admit. As the plane ascended, Michael winced slightly, shifting in his seat. Amelia glanced sideways, and noticed the faint scar along his wrist, a deeper one peeking from beneath his sleeve. "Another war wound?" she asked, her tone still sharp. Michael nodded, his voice quiet. "IED in Iraq. Lost 2 friends that day." Amelia said nothing, her gaze returning to her tablet. The conversation was over, or so she thought. But as the flight continued, she found herself stealing glances at Michael. Despite his stoic demeanor, there was a heaviness about him, an unspoken pain that lingered in his eyes. When the plane landed in New York, Amelia wasted no time collecting her belongings and stepping briskly into the terminal. She didn't look back as she disappeared into the crowd, eager to put the awkward encounter behind her. That night, in her luxurious hotel room, Amelia sipped a glass of wine and scrolled through the day's headlines. Her heart sank as one story caught her attention, a local news article about a soldier fighting for his daughter's life. The photo accompanying the story stopped her cold. It was Michael, sitting by a hospital bed, holding the hand of a frail little girl with tubes running from her arms. Amelia's breath caught in her throat as she read the story. Michael wasn't just a soldier. He was a decorated hero who had saved countless lives during his tours. And yet, here he was, working multiple jobs to pay for experimental treatments for his daughter. Her wine glass slipped from her hand, shattering on the floor. In that moment, the weight of her earlier words crashed down on her. She had misjudged him entirely, and the realization left her shaken. For the first time in years, Amelia Taylor felt something unfamiliar: regret. But regret, she decided, wasn't enough. She needed to make it right. And so, with trembling hands, she opened her laptop and began to type. Awakening. Amelia sat frozen at the edge of her hotel bed, staring at the glowing screen of her laptop. The article about Michael and his daughter, Lily, remained open, but the words blurred together as a wave of emotion surged through her. She had spent her life building walls. Walls of prestige, professionalism, and an air of untouchable competence. But now, cracks began to form in those walls, exposing a side of her she hadn't acknowledged in years. The words of the article played on a loop in her mind. Staff Sergeant Michael Carter, recipient of the Bronze Star and Purple Heart, now faces the greatest battle of his life. Not on a battlefield, but in a hospital room, fighting for his daughter's life. The image of Michael holding his daughter's hand haunted her. Lily's fragile frame and the bravery in her small, tired smile contrasted starkly with Amelia's memory of her dismissive remarks on the plane. She felt like a monster, her heart twisting, as she replayed every cold, cutting word she had thrown at him. Amelia shook her head, trying to regain her composure. She prided herself on her ability to compartmentalize, to focus on solutions rather than emotions. But tonight, it wasn't working. For the first time in years, guilt gnawed at her, and it refused to be silenced. Her trembling fingers hovered over the keyboard. Without fully understanding why, she began to research. She read about Michael's military career, how he had saved his unit from an ambush in Iraq, earning him accolades for bravery. She found a community fundraiser page set up by his fellow soldiers to support Lily's treatment. The modest goal listed there barely scratched the surface of the enormous medical bills he was facing. Amelia glanced at the sleek designer handbag sitting on the hotel dresser and the rows of expensive shoes neatly lined by the closet. She thought of the luxury car parked in her assigned space at home, the condo overlooking the city skyline, and the vacation property she rarely used. Her life was filled with things, but now they felt hollow. With a deep breath, Amelia clicked on the donation link. The number she typed into the box, $20,000, felt both monumental and insufficient. She hesitated for a moment, her cursor hovering over the donate button. It wasn't just the money. It was the symbolic act of acknowledging her guilt, of admitting that she had been wrong. She pressed the button, and a confirmation email appeared in her inbox moments later. Amelia stared at the screen, her heart pounding. It was done, but the guilt remained, heavy and insistent. reminding her that money alone couldn't undo the harm she had caused. As the night stretched on, Amelia's thoughts drifted to her own past. She had once known a life of struggle, before the luxury, the career, and the polished veneer she now wore like armor. Memories of her younger self crept in, unbidden but vivid. She thought of her mother working double shifts at a diner to keep food on the table, of the worn-out shoes she had patched with duct tape during her college years, and of the sacrifices she had made to claw her way up the corporate ladder. Somewhere along the way, she had buried those memories, replacing them with a relentless pursuit of success. But now, faced with Michael's story, those buried memories stirred. She thought of her younger self. Would that version of Amelia have sneered at a soldier struggling to save his child? Would she have dismissed someone's pain so easily? Unable to sleep, Amelia grabbed her coat and stepped out into the chilly New York night. The city was alive with its usual energy. Cars honking, people rushing, neon lights flickering in the distance. She walked aimlessly, her thoughts swirling. Eventually, she found herself standing outside a small park, its benches nearly empty except for a man playing a slow, melancholy tune on a saxophone. Amelia sat down on a bench, pulling her coat tighter around her. She watched the musician for a while, his music filling the air with a bittersweet melody. It reminded her of her father, who used to play the saxophone when she was a child. He had been her hero, a man who worked tirelessly to provide for their family, despite his own health issues. He had passed away when she was in college, just as her career was beginning to take off. Amelia hadn't thought about her father in years. The memory of him now, juxtaposed against Michael's story, brought tears to her eyes. She felt a pang of shame for how far she had drifted from the values her father had instilled in her: kindness, compassion, and the importance of helping others. The next morning, Amelia awoke determined. She had always been a woman of action, and this situation was no different. She couldn't undo the hurtful things she had said, but she could try to make amends in a way that mattered. Her first call was to her assistant, Sophie, a resourceful young woman who had worked for her for years. "Sophie, I need your help," Amelia said, her voice brisk but earnest. "I'm going to organize a fundraiser, something big. I'll need a venue, a guest list, and some corporate sponsors." Sophie hesitated. A fundraiser? For what cause? "For a soldier and his daughter," Amelia replied. "It's personal." Though surprised, Sophie didn't press for details. "I'll get started right away. Do you have a timeline?" "As soon as possible," Amelia said. "I'll handle the big-ticket donors myself. Start by reaching out to anyone who owes me a favor." Amelia spent the rest of the day making calls, leveraging her extensive network of contacts. She was relentless, her years of corporate experience now channeled into a cause far removed from quarterly profits and sales targets. By evening, she had secured a ballroom at a prestigious New York hotel, a catering company willing to donate their services, and a handful of prominent guests who had agreed to attend. But it wasn't enough. Not yet. Amelia sat at her laptop, drafting an email to her company's CEO. She knew it was a risk, but she didn't care. Her position in the company gave her access to their charitable foundation, and she intended to use it. The email was direct and to the point, outlining Michael's story and Lily's fight against cancer. Amelia ended with a bold request for the foundation to match all donations raised at the event. She hit send before she could second-guess herself. As the days passed, Amelia threw herself into the fundraiser with single-minded determination. She met with event planners, secured donations for auction items, and even convinced a famous singer to perform at the event. Her energy was fueled not just by guilt, but by a newfound sense of purpose. For the first time in years, she felt like she was working towards something meaningful. Finally, the night of the fundraiser arrived. Amelia stood in the center of the grand ballroom, watching as guests began to fill the space. The room was dazzling, with crystal chandeliers casting a warm glow over elegantly set tables. A silent auction featured items ranging from luxury vacations to signed memorabilia, all donated by Amelia's connections. But the true star of the evening was Lily. With Michael's hesitant approval, she had been brought to the event, her hospital bed temporarily replaced by a plush chaise lounge, decorated with soft blankets and pillows. Dressed as her favorite princess, Lily beamed at the attention, her joy radiating through the room. Michael stood nearby, his expression a mix of gratitude and disbelief. He looked different out of uniform, still strong and composed, but now with a vulnerability that made him seem even more human. Amelia approached him, her heart pounding. "Sergeant Carter," she began, her voice softer than he had ever heard it. "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. For everything. And I hope tonight can make a difference." Michael studied her for a moment, his face unreadable. Then, to her surprise, he extended his hand. "Thank you," he said simply. As Amelia shook his hand, she felt the weight of her actions begin to lift. It wasn't redemption, not yet, but it was a start. And for the first time in a long time, she felt like she was on the right path. The night was far from over, and there was still much to do. But as Amelia watched Lily laugh and play, surrounded by people who cared, she knew she had found something far more valuable than success. She had found her humanity again. Seeds of redemption. The success of the fundraiser reverberated through the halls of the grand ballroom well into the night. As guests left, their conversations were filled with praise for the event and admiration for the bravery of Michael Carter and his daughter, Lily. Amelia stood near the entrance, exchanging polite goodbyes with guests while discreetly ensuring everything had gone smoothly. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, a notification from the fundraiser's online platform. The donations had exceeded $750,000, a number that made her heart race. She had hoped the event would make a difference, but this was beyond her expectations. For the first time in years, Amelia felt a sense of accomplishment that didn't come from closing a deal or winning a corporate battle. This felt real. Michael approached her as the ballroom began to empty, his usual stoic demeanor softened by gratitude. He held Lily in his arms, her tiny body wrapped in a blanket embroidered with her name, a gift from one of the donors. Her head rested on his shoulder, her eyelids drooping with exhaustion, but her hand still clutching a plush unicorn someone had given her during the event. "Ms. Taylor," Michael began, his voice low but steady, "I don't know how to thank you for this. I never expected." "You don't have to thank me," Amelia interrupted, her voice firm but kind. "Tonight wasn't about me. It was about Lily and giving her a fighting chance." Michael hesitated, then nodded. "Still, I know what you've done for us. You didn't have to, but you did." Amelia swallowed the lump in her throat. She wasn't used to being on the receiving end of gratitude, especially from someone she had wronged. "It was the least I could do," she said, her voice softer now. "And if there's anything else I can do, anything at all, you let me know." Michael gave her a small, almost shy smile. "You've already done more than enough." As he walked away, carrying Lily out of the ballroom, Amelia watched them go with a mixture of relief and determination. Tonight had been a step forward, but it wasn't the end. She wasn't finished. The next morning, Amelia returned to her hotel room with a sense of purpose that had been absent from her life for far too long. She poured herself a cup of coffee and sat at the small desk by the window, her laptop open to a blank document. She had decided to write a letter, not to Michael, but to herself. Amelia wasn't the sentimental type, but she felt the need to confront the emotions that had been stirred within her over the past week. She began typing, her words flowing without hesitation. "Dear Amelia, you've spent years building walls. Walls of ambition, success, and the illusion of perfection. But those walls have also kept you from seeing what truly matters. Last night, those walls began to crumble, and for the first time in a long time, you felt something real, compassion, purpose, and the weight of your own mistakes. Don't stop here. Don't let this be a one-time act of redemption. Keep fighting. For Michael, for Lily, for the person you once were and the person you want to be." This is your chance to make things right." She saved the document and closed her laptop. It wasn't a masterpiece, but it was honest. And honesty, she realized, was something she had been missing in her life. Over the next few days, Amelia immersed herself in the world of pediatric oncology. She visited Boston Children's Hospital, not as a donor or a corporate executive, but as someone who wanted to understand the struggles faced by families like Michael's. She spoke with doctors, nurses, and social workers, learning about the challenges of funding experimental treatments and the emotional toll it took on patients and their families. One conversation stuck with her, a nurse named Linda, who had worked in the oncology ward for over a decade. "These families fight battles most people can't even imagine," Linda said, her voice tinged with both exhaustion and hope. "They're not just fighting for their child's life. They're fighting for time, for hope, for a future that isn't guaranteed." Amelia nodded, her chest tightening. She thought of Michael, of his quiet strength and unshakable devotion to Lily. She thought of Lily's radiant smile, a smile that belied the pain and fear she must have felt every day. When Linda paused, Amelia asked, "What can someone like me do? Someone who doesn't have medical expertise or personal experience with this." Linda smiled gently. "You're already doing something. But if you want to do more, use what you're good at. Your connections, your influence, your resources, they can make a bigger difference than you realize." Amelia left the hospital that day with a new sense of direction. She couldn't change the past, but she could shape the future. Back in her corporate world, Amelia began leveraging her position in ways she never had before. She pitched a new initiative to her company's board, a program to fund experimental treatments for children with life-threatening illnesses. It was a bold move, and not everyone was immediately on board. "Amelia, this is a significant departure from our usual charitable efforts," one board member said during a meeting. "Are you sure this is the right direction for the company?" "I'm sure," Amelia replied without hesitation. "Our brand is about luxury and excellence, but what's more excellent than giving children a chance at life? This isn't just good PR, it's the right thing to do." After weeks of negotiations and presentations, the board approved the initiative. It was a small victory, but for Amelia, it felt monumental. Meanwhile, Amelia kept in touch with Michael, though she did so cautiously. She didn't want to overstep, but she also didn't want him to think she had forgotten about Lily's fight. She sent small care packages to the hospital, books for Lily, snacks for Michael, and handwritten notes of encouragement. She never expected a response, but one day she received a text from Michael. "Thank you for the books. Lily loves them. She says you're her fairy godmother." Amelia smiled at the message, her heart swelling. She hadn't been called a fairy godmother before, but it felt strangely fitting. Weeks turned into months, and Amelia's life continued to transform. She found herself spending less time in high-powered meetings and more time working on initiatives that truly mattered. She began volunteering at the hospital, not as a benefactor, but as a listener. She sat with parents who needed a shoulder to cry on, and read stories to children who just wanted a distraction from their pain. One day, as she walked through the hospital's oncology ward, she spotted Michael sitting in the hallway outside Lily's room. He looked more tired than usual, his head resting in his hands. "Michael," Amelia said gently. He looked up, his eyes bloodshot but still filled with that unyielding determination she had come to admire. "Amelia," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "they're starting the new treatment today. It's our last hope." Amelia sat beside him, her hand resting lightly on his arm. "Then she's in the best hands possible, and she has you." Michael nodded, but the fear in his eyes was unmistakable. "I just wish I could do more." "You're doing everything you can," Amelia said firmly, "and you're not alone in this. None of us are." For the first time, Michael let himself lean on her, if only for a moment. And in that moment, Amelia realized something she hadn't fully understood before. Redemption wasn't just about making amends. It was about building something better, something stronger, together. As they sat in that quiet hallway, waiting for news, Amelia knew she was exactly where she needed to be. And for the first time in her life, she felt whole. Breaking down the barriers. The air in the hospital felt heavy with expectation. As Amelia sat beside Michael in the hallway, she watched him wring his hands. Large, calloused hands that had endured years of hardship, but now trembled with uncertainty. The door to Lily's room remained closed, and every passing moment seemed to stretch into eternity. Inside, the doctors were administering the first dose of an experimental treatment that could either be a breakthrough or a final attempt. Amelia felt an ache in her chest, a deep sense of helplessness. She was a woman of action, someone who thrived on control, but here she could do nothing but wait. And so, she waited, with Michael. "Do you want some coffee?" she asked softly, breaking the silence. Michael shook his head. "I couldn't drink it even if I tried." Amelia nodded, leaning back in her chair. She noticed how exhausted he looked. The deep shadows under his eyes, the lines of tension etched across his face. She didn't press him further, sensing he needed the silence more than he needed conversation. Hours passed before the door to Lily's room finally opened. A doctor stepped out, pulling off his gloves as he approached. Michael stood immediately, his body rigid with anticipation. Amelia rose too, her heart pounding. "The treatment went as expected," the doctor said, his tone calm but measured. "It's too early to tell if it's working, but she's stable. That's a good sign." Michael exhaled sharply, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly. "Can I see her?" The doctor nodded. "Of course. She's awake, but she'll likely be groggy for a while." Michael thanked the doctor and turned to Amelia. Would you like to come in?" he asked hesitantly. Amelia blinked in surprise. She hadn't expected the invitation, but she nodded. "If you're okay with it, yes. I'd like that." Inside the room, Lily lay propped up on a bed surrounded by monitors. Her skin was pale, and her small frame seemed almost lost among the blankets and medical equipment. But when she saw Michael, a faint smile appeared on her lips. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice weak but filled with warmth. Michael rushed to her side, taking her tiny hand in his. "Hey, princess, how are you feeling?" "Tired," she murmured. Her eyes shifted to Amelia, curiosity flickering in their depths. "Who's that?" Amelia stepped closer, offering a gentle smile. "Hi, Lily. My name's Amelia. I'm a friend of your dad's." Lily's smile widened, faint but genuine. "You're pretty," she said matter-of-factly, her voice barely above a whisper. Amelia chuckled, her heart swelling. "Thank you, but I think you're the prettiest one here." Lily giggled softly, though the effort seemed to tire her. Michael sat on the edge of the bed, his hand never leaving hers. Amelia watched the tender interaction, her throat tightening. She had always seen strength as something loud and commanding, but Michael's quiet devotion redefined it entirely. The days that followed were a whirlwind of cautious optimism. The treatment seemed to be stabilizing Lily's condition, though the doctors warned it was too soon to determine its long-term effectiveness. Amelia stayed close, dividing her time between the hospital and her new initiatives at work. Her company's charitable program, now officially approved, began funding experimental treatments for children like Lily. Amelia worked tirelessly to ensure the program's success, using her corporate influence to rally support from other organizations. For the first time, she felt like her career wasn't just about profit margins and prestige. It was about making a tangible difference. One evening, as Amelia reviewed grant proposals in the hospital's cafeteria, Michael joined her. He carried 2 cups of coffee, setting one down in front of her. "I figured you might need this," he said, his voice breaking her concentration. Amelia looked up, startled but grateful. "Thank you," she said, taking the sip. The coffee was lukewarm and a little too sweet, but she didn't mind. Michael sat across from her, his posture more relaxed than she had ever seen. "You've been spending a lot of time here," he said, his tone thoughtful. "Why?" Amelia hesitated. She had asked herself the same question many times over the past weeks. "Because I want to help," she said finally. "Because I owe it to you and Lily. And because it feels right." Michael studied her, his gaze steady. "You don't owe us anything, Amelia. What you've done, no one could have expected that." Amelia shook her head. "You don't understand. On that plane, I was awful to you. I judged you, said terrible things, and I didn't even know you. I've been carrying that guilt ever since." Michael nodded slowly. "You did say some things that stung," he admitted. "But people say things they don't mean all the time. What matters is what they do afterward. And you've done more than I could ever ask for." Amelia looked down at her coffee, her cheeks flushing with a mixture of relief and shame. "I'm trying," she said softly. "I just want to make things right." "You already have," Michael said. "But if you're still looking for redemption, maybe stop trying so hard to fix the past. Focus on the future." His words lingered with her long after their conversation ended. As Amelia spent more time with Michael and Lily, she began to notice a shift within herself. The walls she had built to protect her from vulnerability were crumbling, and in their place, a new foundation was forming. One built on compassion, connection, and purpose. She found herself laughing more, caring more, and opening up in ways she hadn't thought possible. One afternoon, as she read a book to Lily, the little girl asked a question that caught her off guard. "Miss Amelia, do you have a princess dress?" Amelia blinked, startled by the question. "A princess dress," she repeated. Lily nodded, her eyes bright with curiosity. "You should get one. Then we can both be princesses." Amelia smiled, her heart melting. "I think I'd like that." The idea stayed with her, and a week later, Amelia walked into the hospital wearing a shimmering gown in Lily's favorite color, gold. The dress was elegant and regal, its flowing fabric catching the light as she entered Lily's room. Lily's eyes widened with delight. "You look like Belle," she exclaimed, her voice stronger than usual. Amelia curtsied playfully. "And you, Princess Lily, are the star of the kingdom." Michael, standing in the corner, chuckled softly. "I think you've made her year," he said, his tone warm. Amelia smiled at him, a blush creeping into her cheeks. "Well, every princess deserves a little magic." That night, as Amelia returned to her hotel room, she reflected on how much her life had changed. She no longer measured her success by promotions or accolades. Instead, she found fulfillment in the moments that mattered. Lily's laughter, Michael's quiet gratitude, and the knowledge that she was part of something bigger than herself. The woman who had once dismissed a soldier as a symbol of undeserved privilege was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, someone who had learned that true strength came from vulnerability, compassion, and the courage to change. Amelia knew there was still much work to be done, both for Lily and for herself. But for the first time in years, she felt like she was on the right path. And as she drifted off to sleep, she couldn't help but smile, knowing that her journey was only just beginning. The unraveling of a fortress. The hospital room glowed with a soft, warm light as the evening sun dipped below the horizon. Amelia sat in the chair beside Lily's bed, the small girl leaning against her shoulder, engrossed in a storybook about a brave princess who defeated a dragon to save her kingdom. Michael sat nearby, his hand resting protectively on Lily's other hand as he watched the scene unfold. Amelia had never imagined herself in a moment like this. Her life had been a relentless march of boardrooms, late-night strategy sessions, and high-stakes deals. Yet here she was, in a simple hospital room, feeling more fulfilled than she ever had in a penthouse office or a luxury suite. "She reminds me of you, Miss Amelia," Lily said suddenly, pointing to the book's protagonist. Her voice, still soft from her weakened state, carried an undeniable warmth. "Me?" Amelia asked, her voice filled with surprise. Lily nodded, her gaze steady. "The princess. She's brave and helps everyone." Amelia's throat tightened. She wasn't sure if she deserved such words, but coming from Lily, they felt like the highest honor. Michael smiled, his voice teasing. She's got a point. You've been doing a lot of dragon slaying lately. Amelia laughed softly, though her cheeks flushed. I think the two of you give me too much credit. I'm just trying. Lily squeezed Amelia's hand. You're doing good. Amelia leaned down and kissed the top of Lily's head, her heart swelling. Thank you, sweetheart. That means more to me than you know. Later that night, as Amelia left the hospital and walked back to her car, her phone buzzed. She pulled it out of her purse and saw a call from Sophie, her assistant. Hi, Sophie, Amelia answered, unlocking her car. Hi, Miss Taylor. Sorry to call so late, but I thought you'd want to know. The board approved the expanded funding for the pediatric initiative. It's official now. Amelia's lips parted in shock, then curled into a smile. That's incredible news. Thank you for letting me know, Sophie. There's one more thing, Sophie added. They want you to spearhead the program permanently. They think your passion and personal involvement make you the best fit. Amelia froze. Her passion, her personal involvement. These weren't words that had been associated with her career in years. She had been known as the unflappable closer, the numbers-driven executive who never let emotions cloud her decisions. And yet, here she was, being recognized for qualities she had spent so long burying. I'll need some time to think about it, Amelia said finally, though her heart already knew the answer. The following morning, Amelia returned to the hospital with a newfound sense of purpose. She brought coffee for Michael and a small bouquet of flowers for Lily, who greeted her with a bright smile despite her pale complexion. Good morning, Princess Lily, Amelia said, setting the flowers on the bedside table. Good morning, Princess Amelia, Lily replied, giggling. Michael chuckled. I see you've been promoted. Apparently, Amelia said with a grin. She turned to Michael, her tone softening. How's she doing today? Better, he said, though the exhaustion in his voice suggested he wasn't as optimistic as he let on. The doctors say her vitals are stable, but we won't know if the treatment is working for a while. Amelia nodded, her gaze lingering on Lily. She's a fighter, she said, just like her dad. Michael looked at her, his expression unreadable for a moment. Then he smiled, a small but genuine smile that lit up his tired face. I guess she gets it from somewhere. Over the next week, Amelia continued her visits to the hospital, each one deepening her bond with Lily and Michael. She became a regular fixture in their lives, reading to Lily, bringing small gifts, and keeping Michael company during the long, uncertain hours. But while her connection with them grew stronger, her corporate life began to feel increasingly distant. Meetings and reports felt trivial compared to the life-or-death stakes of Lily's battle. Amelia began to question everything, her priorities, her goals, even her identity. One evening, as she sat in the hospital cafeteria with Michael, she voiced her thoughts for the first time. I've been thinking about stepping back from my job, she said, stirring her tea absently. Michael looked at her, surprised. Why? You've worked so hard to get where you are. I don't know, Amelia admitted. It just doesn't feel meaningful anymore. Not compared to this. She gestured toward the hospital around them. Michael studied her for a moment, then nodded. I get it. When Lily was born, everything changed for me. The things I used to think were important, promotions, recognition, they just didn't matter anymore. Amelia smiled faintly. I guess I'm a late bloomer in that sense. Michael leaned forward, his voice gentle. You don't have to give up everything to find meaning. You're already making a difference, Amelia. More than you realize. Amelia's heart warmed at his words, but the doubt lingered. Could she really balance the corporate world with the person she was becoming? Or would she have to choose? The following day brought a turning point. Amelia was sitting in Lily's room, reading to her from a book about constellations, when a nurse entered with a clipboard. Miss Taylor, there's someone here to see you, the nurse said. Amelia frowned, puzzled. Who? The nurse smiled. He didn't give his name, but he said he's here to thank you for what you've done for the Carter family. Curious, Amelia followed the nurse to the hospital lobby. There, she found a group of people waiting, men and women in military uniforms, some in civilian clothes, all standing together. One of them stepped forward, a tall man with a stern but kind face. "Ms. Taylor," he said, extending his hand. "I'm Colonel Harris. I served with Michael Carter. We heard about everything you've done for him and Lily, and we wanted to thank you personally." Amelia's eyes widened. "Oh, I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," Colonel Harris said. "Just know that your efforts haven't gone unnoticed. Michael's one of the best men I've ever served with, and what you've done for him and his daughter is nothing short of extraordinary." Amelia felt a lump form in her throat. These were people who had fought and sacrificed for others, yet they were here to thank her. It felt overwhelming, humbling, and profoundly moving. "Thank you," she said softly. "But honestly, I feel like I'm the one who should be thanking all of you." Colonel Harris smiled. "You've already done that. More than you know." As the group dispersed, Amelia stood in the lobby, her heart full. She had spent so long building walls to protect herself, but now those walls had crumbled, revealing a version of herself she barely recognized, a version she was proud of. That night, as she sat in her hotel room, Amelia made a decision. She opened her laptop and drafted an email to her company's board, officially accepting their offer to lead the pediatric initiative. She knew it would mean stepping away from her previous role, but for the first time in her career, she didn't care. This was where she was meant to be. And as she hit send, Amelia felt a sense of peace she hadn't felt in years. Her life was changing, and for once, it was changing for the better. A new dawn. The brisk morning air carried the scent of autumn leaves as Amelia stood outside the hospital, her hands clasping a cup of coffee that had long since cooled. It had been nearly 3 months since the fundraiser, and life had taken on a rhythm Amelia could never have predicted. Her high-powered corporate career was no longer the center of her universe. Instead, she had fully embraced her new role as the head of the pediatric initiative, dedicating her energy to making a tangible difference in the lives of families like Michael and Lily. Today was a pivotal day, not just for Lily, but for Amelia as well. It marked the final round of Lily's experimental treatment, a moment filled with equal parts hope and apprehension. The doctors had prepared everyone for the reality that even if the treatment worked, the road ahead would still be long. But the fact that Lily had made it this far felt like a victory in itself. As Amelia sipped her coffee, her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was Sophie. "Good morning," Amelia answered, her voice calm but tinged with nervous energy. "Good morning, Miss Taylor," Sophie said, her tone cheerful. "Just wanted to let you know that the new campaign you approved is live. Donations are already pouring in." Amelia smiled. The campaign, which aimed to expand funding for experimental pediatric treatments nationwide, was her most ambitious project yet. "That's fantastic news, Sophie. Keep me updated." "I will," Sophie said. "And good luck today, with Lily, I mean." "Thank you," Amelia said softly, hanging up. She turned and walked back into the hospital, her heels clicking softly against the tiled floor. As she approached Lily's room, she saw Michael standing just outside, his hands in his pockets and his gaze fixed on the floor. He looked up as she approached, a small, weary smile crossing his face. "Hey," he said, his voice warm but subdued. "Hey," Amelia replied, stopping beside him. "How's she doing?" Michael exhaled slowly, nervous but holding up. "She's stronger than I am." Amelia touched his arm gently. "You've been strong for her every step of the way." Michael met her gaze, something unspoken passing between them. Over the past few months, their connection had deepened in ways neither had anticipated. What had started as a mission of redemption for Amelia had grown into a genuine bond, a partnership forged in the fires of shared struggle and hope. "I don't know what we would have done without you," Michael said after a moment. You've been more than a friend to Lily. You've been family. Amelia felt her throat tighten. She had heard similar sentiments from others before, but coming from Michael, it meant something more profound. She's changed my life, Amelia said honestly. You both have. Before Michael could respond, the door to Lily's room opened, and a nurse stepped out. You can come in now, she said with a smile. Inside, Lily was sitting up in bed, her face lit with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. Her favorite stuffed unicorn was tucked under one arm, and a book about constellations lay open on her lap. Daddy, Miss Amelia, she called out, her voice filled with joy. Hey, Princess, Michael said, crossing the room to sit beside her. He took her hand, his smile softening as he looked at her. Amelia sat on Lily's other side, smoothing a strand of the girl's hair. How's our little star today? She asked. Good, Lily said, though her small hands betrayed a hint of nervous fidgeting. The nurse said this is the last treatment. It is, Amelia said, and you've been so brave. We're all so proud of you. The door opened again, and the doctor entered, his expression calm and reassuring. Good morning, Lily, he said. Are you ready for today? Lily nodded, clutching her unicorn tighter. Ready. The procedure began, and though it was routine by now, the tension in the room was palpable. Michael held Lily's hand, his thumb brushing over her knuckles, while Amelia sat quietly, her heart pounding with every beep of the monitors. When it was over, the doctor smiled. All done, Lily. You were amazing, as always. Is it working? Lily asked, her voice small but filled with hope. The doctor crouched down to her level, his gaze kind. We won't know for sure for a little while, but you've been doing great. Keep being the brave princess you are, okay? Lily nodded, her smile returning. Okay. As the weeks passed, the hospital staff monitored Lily closely, watching for signs that the treatment had taken hold. Michael and Amelia continued their daily routine of supporting her, their bond growing stronger with each shared moment of triumph and uncertainty. One evening, as they sat together in the hospital cafeteria, Michael spoke up. I've been thinking a lot about what comes next, he said, his tone contemplative. Amelia looked at him, curious. What do you mean? For Lily, for me, Michael said. If the treatment works, I want her to have a normal life. School, friends, everything she's missed out on. Amelia smiled. She deserves that. And so do you. Michael hesitated and added, I want her to have people like you in her life too. People who care about her the way you do. Amelia felt her cheeks flush. She looked down at her coffee, her heart racing. Michael, I'll always be here for Lily. For both of you. Michael reached across the table, his hand brushing hers. I know, he said softly, and I'm grateful. More than I can ever say. A month later, the results came in. The treatment had been successful. Lily's cancer was in remission. The news spread through the hospital like wildfire, bringing tears and cheers from everyone who had watched Lily's journey. Michael wept openly for the first time in years, holding Lily tightly as she laughed and cried at the same time. Amelia stood nearby, her own tears streaming down her face as she witnessed the moment she had prayed for. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of celebration and adjustment. Lily was discharged from the hospital, and Michael began the process of building a new life for them, a life filled with possibilities rather than fear. Amelia remained a constant presence, helping Michael navigate the challenges of transitioning back to a normal routine. She also continued to expand her pediatric initiative, channeling the lessons she had learned into creating a lasting impact for other families. One evening, as the three of them sat in Michael's modest new home, Lily fast asleep in her room, Michael turned to Amelia. I've been thinking, he said, his voice low, about how much you've done for us. For me. Amelia smiled, shaking her head. Michael, you've said that 100 times. You don't have to keep thanking me. I do, Michael insisted. Because you didn't just save Lily. You saved me too. Amelia's breath caught. You saved me right back, she said, her voice trembling. Michael leaned closer, his gaze steady and warm. Then maybe it's time we stop saving each other and start living. Amelia's heart swelled, her walls fully crumbled now, replaced by something stronger. I think I'd like that. As the night deepened, they sat together, the weight of the past finally giving way to the promise of a brighter future. And for the first time in years, Amelia felt truly free.